Hello, everybody. It's Matt Linklater with Link Biz Solutions, and welcome to our Family Office podcast. This is all about how do we bring more value to business owners and how do we put more money back into your pocket. So whether that's saving money on assets, if that's saving money on insurance costs, if that's building a legacy, and really it's about building more value into your business and more value into your family. So this week I brought to you and I'm bringing to you Dan Scott. Dan Scott is all about reinventing the business of law. What's really unique about his approach is that they've created a value-based approach to their fees. Which, if you know anything about doing business with a lawyer, if you're being charged hourly, you're hesitant to send that email, you're hesitant to make that phone call because you know the clock is ticking. So a value-based approach to fees is very unique and very appreciated from people like me in the business world. Dan's areas of expertise are trust and estate planning, legacy and succession planning, mediation, and corporate general counsel. Dan works with he works with people as their personal legal and business advisors. He works with families. He works with businesses in the U.S. and abroad. So whether you're an individual, family, or business, they serve as your legal alter ego to help you navigate the road to greatness within your life and your business and your finances. So Dan works with some notables. He works with actors. He works with heirs. He works with restaurateurs. He works with private equity funds, tech entrepreneurs, multi-generational family trusts. And so Dan has a very unique business, works with some very high-powered people. And what's really cool about Dan is he lives in Connecticut with an awesome wife, two crazy little boys, but he works in the mayhem of New York City. So, hey, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being on today. So, Dan, why don't we just start out? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you get started? Tell us about your business. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I spent the better part of my early legal career at large law firms, dealing in their private client group, and navigated that circuit for the better part of 12 or so years. And, sort of identified two what I considered large problems. One was just on the legal practice side. I was in groups labeled as trust and estates and called a trusted estate lawyer, and that practice had become sort of heavily focused on estate tax and succession of wealth and things. And for me, it became really too tax driven. And we know now, there's statistics out there that show that traditional estate planning, the idea of having wills and trusts and things in place, it's not working, right? There's a 70% chance that wealth is lost by the second generation and a 90% chance that it's lost by the third. So something is missing in the equation in the traditional practice of trust and estates. And for me, it became obvious that the problem was we were too focused on the assets themselves, right? So estate planning is when you ask one what that is, I think the answer is it is what happens to your property when you die. And so we were focused on assets and death. And in terms of leaving something behind when you're gone, I always thought of it as, you're much more than what you own, right? Your legacy is much greater than any property that you own, right? And so the stories and the values and everything that you represented on this planet as an individual, that's what we really should be preserving. And it's really the purpose behind the assets that you ultimately own that has value and meaning. And just handing somebody assets or the value of money is really based on the direction that it's given, the purpose that it's given. So legacy planning as opposed to estate planning became my focus, which is to say, when someone passes, how do we create a structure and a process that preserves the totality of that person, passes all of those things down, including financial assets, in a meaningful way, but gives those assets direction and purpose. And I think it's that missing purpose and direction that is the primary reason that wealth is lost, because we hand assets over and the rest kind of, that the meaning behind it, the purpose behind that person's life ultimately gets lost. So I set out to create a different type of practice for the clients that I was working with, to have a shift away from traditional estate planning and a focus on legacy planning. And that quickly evolved to, a legacy is not just something left when you die. It's something lived, right, during your life. We are all currently, whether we like it or not, living and creating our legacies. So I wanted to take a proactive approach to serving as a trusted legal advisor for clients where I could help them, right, create a structure, a legacy structure that not only would preserve who they are, but would propel them forward towards that success and legacy that they ultimately wanted to create and leave. So from a practice perspective, I was dealing with a sort of a frustration with the way that traditional estate planning groups were focused and what the industry was focused on, and felt a need to build something different. And then there was the issue of a traditional law firm model, right, and how that works. And if you want to be proactive and to work with clients on building legacies and helping them achieve their success, things like the billable hour are a disincentive to a relationship, right? I don't want to be the last person that a client calls because they're worried about the cost of that fee. So I wanted to create a model that incentivized a relationship, incentivized my role in their life as an advisor, because the more that I know, the better I can help my clients. And part of that became, very obviously in my structure, the flat fee value-based model, that I didn't want to look at a clock. I didn't want to have my clients worried about time. I wanted to create, I work on flat advisory fees, which for most clients are sort of based on a projected annual budget and a scope of work. And to be able to work behind the scenes with their other advisors, a team of advisors, so that we can kind of work collectively, when we're not with the client, and be incentivized to all be working together to push that client forward. So it became about, having to create a new model that was better to service those clients and to take a very different approach to law. And then the other big problem that was going on was, quite frankly, law firms, and with exception obviously, but by and large, I think if you talk to most lawyers, they're not very fulfilling places to work. They're at times they're miserable, quite frankly. And this always, I never understood this. I kind of saw it as a very unnecessary negative. And there's a host of reasons behind it, things like lack of leadership, things like the billable hour and such. But I also wanted to, to the extent I was passionate about helping my clients propel them towards achieving their legacy and purpose and things, I wanted to create a platform that was equally able to propel other attorneys, right? To have a place where you can be inspired, come to work, and feel a sense of fulfillment yourself. And so that was, sort of the two driving forces behind the launch of Scott Law, and what will be the, trying to scale this and grow this into a larger firm for attorneys. Yep. Is it was not only a better service model for the client, but it was a better service model for the attorney themselves.
Well, that's exactly kind of what you're saying, is summed up in this is, I was working with a couple of attorneys recently, and I hired one attorney, but I went back to kind of a family attorney I've used for the last 10 years on some things. And the reason I went to him is because the other attorney was making it feel so transactional. Whenever you get the bill, you get the hourly bill on it. He's busy. He's just running around. It was just more of a transaction rather than value-based, sitting down, understanding my needs and kind of how, and my goals, and trying to get me there. So one thing you said is pretty important there. And I think, as a business person, as a salesperson, is having a purpose-driven estate and legacy. And so I was recently just with a gentleman who has a $60 million estate, and somebody did their trust, but they were confused with what they had. And exactly what you're saying is that person did not identify what the purpose of the trust is. Because if you know what your purpose is, you know what you have, you know what you're trying to accomplish, rather than just having this trust. So, take me through the process of how you work with a client and identifying their purpose. Like, so if somebody comes to work with you, what does it look and feel like compared to other places? Take me through that process, and how do you identify their purpose, if you will?
So I talk to clients because everyone likes sort of tangible, results, or something they can kind of grab onto. And to simplify the idea of legacy planning, I have broken it down into sort of 4 components for clients. A legacy plan and putting a legacy plan together for a client consists of a legacy team, one. So that is the team of trusted advisors that are going to be working proactively together to help you achieve and create your legacy. Traditionally, right, that would be somebody, there's kind of the core three for traditional clients, meaning traditional wealthy clients. That would be, someone on the personal legal, tax is another component, and typically a wealth or financial advisor, right?
Yeah.
And then you build out from there. And I tell clients everyone's team is unique to who they are and maybe their business, et cetera. I can, for some clients, foresee where there's a sort of life coach or a spiritual advisor on that team. There's a lot of different, things to flesh out.
Sure.
And the point is, how do we, based on the individual and the individual's goals and life view, who's necessary there, right? So that's team. Second are legacy assets. So there are assets, right? The idea of creating an ongoing legacy, you have to take, and to the extent the legacy is the totality of your life's being. Well, how does that live, right? It has to live through something tangible. It has to live through an asset of some sort, be it a company or, so typically a family company. It could be a family office type structure, some sort of vehicle that can become a perpetual thing that lives, during your life, but also will live beyond your life, that ends up representing you, right? So you build in the you, all of those different components of what you represent into those assets. It could be, for artists, it could be a collection of works, right? It could be a lot of different things. So identifying what are your legacy assets separate and apart from what are maybe just purely financial assets, right? So you can have a vacation home or something that really is part of your estate, but it's not necessarily part of your legacy, right?
Yep.
So legacy team, legacy assets. Then you have a structure, which is the initial ownership structure through which you own and operate and control those legacy assets, through which that team works proactively together to help you manage, operate, and control those assets and propel you forward. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at those three components, you can sort of align that with a traditional estate plan, right? This is what we do. We create a structure to own assets. Now, we don't necessarily identify between estate and legacy assets, but that's sort of some version of that is happening now. Yeah. The fourth element is really the most important part of a legacy plan. It's what I call legacy process, because the reality of your legacy is that it's never ending, it's ever evolving, and it's going to change. So what estate planning fails to do typically is, clients will have an estate plan drafted, they'll put a structure in place that owns assets, and they'll tuck it away in a drawer somewhere, right, and they'll never look at it. And what happens is the plan fails to work. Right. So creating a discipline and a commitment to that discipline of an ongoing process where we're going to formally create the obligation of that team to come together, right, and address legacy type issues, to extract clients from the day-to-day weeds of their business or whatever it is that they're in, which are often revenue generating, right, taking care of the family, tending to your life. It's easy to get lost and lose sight of the bigger picture. So that process is the most important part. So when it comes to how do we work together, depending on where a client is, some clients come to you and they have already an estate plan. And so you have to look at that. That's a form of a structure already in place. They may already have some form of a team in place. They may have some of those things, and it's about identifying and seeing what sort of tweaks or changes could be made initially. But then it's about creating a process around either the plan that already exists or, helping formulate the initial plan in terms of building a team and building, identifying those assets and tweaking the structure and then putting that process in place. And that's where that ongoing advisor role comes in. Successful families have done this, right? So the Rockefellers, for example, are revered for their estate planning. Right. And they have used traditional estate planning tools and vehicles, types of trust and things. And there is great value to, a legacy plan will use traditional estate planning tools. So it's really an evolution of estate planning, right? It's not that we're scrapping everything. We can take a traditional estate plan and build it into a legacy plan. But someone like the Rockefellers have done this, and they've created a discipline of family meetings and creating ways to make necessary family communication and education and all these different components that are part of preparing heirs, right? So there's a lot of different building into that process. Not only will we continually identify and refine, right, who the client is and what their purpose or legacy is going to be, that's part of that process. How those values, goals, and all of that, sort of intangible, the totality of their life, how we're going to build those formally into that structure and insist on those being carried forward. Those are all parts of that process, as well as the succession, right, of management and control. And part of succession planning are, we talk about, instilling communication and certain values within the family and next generation, education of those that will eventually take over the reins, whether that's family members or other professionals. And so there's a long kind of ongoing process in order to ensure not only that the client achieves their life legacy and goals, but that is carried forward responsibly and consistent with the client's vision.
You know exactly what you're saying there is 100% why you've created such a valuable business. Is, the first step there is the legacy team, if you will. The problem that when we work with business owners is they have a fragmented team. There are attorneys over here, there are CPAs over here, there are financial advisors over here. And so it's all about creating that congruent triangle of wealth is what we call it, is how do you get everybody on the same team? And you guys operate as that quarterback. And the next thing that I think is hugely beneficial of what you're saying, and if I can, because this is what I use for my own estate, is something I call, or there's out there. It's not that I call it, but I've heard out there, and I've studied this and researched it. Is that Rockefeller method? And really, what that boils down to us is, we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and so we've established, kind of that family mission statement, but I didn't take it lightly. I mean, this is what we live each and every day. We took our family values. Again, we don't take it lightly. This is something that we want to live every day. And when I really say live is that we want to indoctrinate our kids into our way of thinking. And so our way of thinking is that kind of building wealth, those values, living a value-based life. And then underneath that, what we did is listed out different activities that they get bonused out for. And then, so that could be reading certain books, attending certain schools, attending certain, one thing we like is neuro-linguistic programming. So if they go become certified neuro-linguistic programming, they get bonuses. And the trust then replenishes itself because we actually want to, it buys insurance on them. So when they go to take money out of the trust, we buy insurance on each of the kids. And so therefore, God forbid, when they pass on for the next generation, the trust will replenish themselves with the value they've created and the money that we've invested into them, if you will, through that trust, is because we really want it to be a purpose, just like you're talking about, is how do you define that purpose? How do you set the process for that purpose? And then how do you have that purpose replenish itself? That's kind of how we look at it.
Sure. Yeah, I would, one sort of caveat there, and I'm not saying you're not saying this, but it's something that's often not discussed, is I really like to distinguish the difference between an individual's legacy and a family legacy.
Yep.
And so I think too often the individual legacy gets lost.
Yeah.
I'm, romantic about the human condition and things where I think that everybody, the most unique thing you have to offer the world is tied to who you are as an individual. It's the only thing I can't be, right, is who you are.
That's right.
In your unique makeup. And so trying to help a client realize the best, right, that they can achieve as an individual, to extract from them, right? That's their individual legacy. What contribution have you made as an individual? What's the dent that you've made or are capable of making in the universe?
Right.
And I think it's important to protect and preserve that separate and apart from a family legacy. There's sort of tiers, right? A family legacy, if properly done, should really be a collection of individual legacies. And your individual life legacy as a father, right, should be an example, right? So, and we talk about, it's funny, we talk about generational wealth.
Right.
And what I tell clients is it's sort of a misnomer. The last thing anybody really wants to hand their children is just a pile of wealth and money.
That's right.
What we really, I think, talk about as families is, we want our kids to, have the opportunity for a happy, fulfilled life, right? That's what we want for our kids. We want them to be safe and, those sorts of things. So really what we're talking about is generational opportunity. Oh. And if you, as an individual, pursue and serve as an example of the pursuit of your individual legacy, your best life, that's going to empower the next generation to pursue and their own life, their own human fulfillment, their own purpose. And to the extent there is wealth there in terms of financial, capital, well, that can help, right? That can serve as a launch pad sometimes for opportunity. But it's much less about the actual assets and much more about the application of those. And that's where, family legacy versus individual legacy is very important, because the family legacy, to the extent we identify family goals and a family identity, which is some of what you're talking about, that necessarily involves family members over time, right? So that's, and that family legacy will potentially should evolve and change as other family members, mature and become adults, become part of that process in terms of identifying family values and goals, right? That's separate from you as an individual set up, a wildly successful business that is your dent in the universe. The distinction is, I'm of the opinion that, it is probably rarely the case that your family should take over the management and control of your individual legacy assets. That's often where we end up confusing, right? Your children's legacy is not necessarily your own.
That's right.
And who should properly manage and continue and your own legacy in terms of that business and things forward, let your children, liberate them to be free to follow their own. Don't necessarily ingrain them in the management and control of your business.
Right.
So hiring, having professionals take over. I'm not saying that the economics, the revenue generated from that business shouldn't benefit the family, but we kind of confuse the two, and we create trust structures where, the family are the ultimate shareholders, right, of the family company. Because even if it's a fully discretionary trust for the family, well, those beneficiaries have the ability to bring a lawsuit against the trustee or, kind of influence ultimately those assets, your legacy assets.
Yep.
And we need to be careful about that. If we can isolate those assets as much as we can from family disputes and things that may arise, and sometimes are healthy to arise, right? Family disputes aren't always unhealthy, right? Disagreements are often healthy. But to have a disagreement around a legacy asset that stalls its operation or interferes in its success, that's a negative outcome of that family dispute. So it's very important to separate out and isolate the family from the individual.
Yep.
When it comes to legacy.
Oh, totally. I completely understand. The values I want to install and instill on my kids, and how I do that through my trust, are definitely different than, do I want them to operate my businesses or not operate my businesses? Certainly, I want them to go bigger and better than I have. And that doesn't necessarily mean in business or monetarily. It just means in quality and life purpose and living a value driven life, if you will. So totally understand. So, I have a quick question for you on that, since we're, this is talking, this is, although it's riveting to you and I, and some of our business owners are certainly going to really enjoy this topic. I mean, one of the other things that we like to talk about is, in listening to and chatting with people like you is, tell me how, I don't want to say balance, like how do you balance your family life and your work really is, when you integrate the two, because I feel like there is no balance in life, right? I mean, there are choices and there are consequences. And so how do you integrate, your family, your kids into this ideals into these ideals. And although we want to build a legacy with legal trusts and entities, how do you drive that purpose into your boys? And what are some of the things that you try to bring to your family that you want to install as we're kind of talking about this?
Well, I mean, I try to live by example. I mean, I've always had very open communication. Communication is big in my home, so stressing and creating a real trust
Yep.
is important. It's been a while now. I mean, my kids are 8 and 9, so I'd say it's been maybe a couple of years where we've had a regular weekly, what we call a family meeting,
Yeah.
and I took this from someone or a book somewhere. So credit to whomever I read this, but the idea is you keep it simple,
Yep.
but you kind of discuss three topics, and everyone kind of goes around the table and you discuss, you reflect on the week that has passed,
Yep.
and what went well and what didn't go so well, and you talk about those things, and then you plan for the week coming up.
Yep.
And that's, and then you give anyone the opportunity to talk about whatever they want. And so that's just a way of encouraging communication, the role, of everyone really trusting each other is important. So that's, and we started the allowance system where it's, different pots of money. They have a savings bank and a spending bank and a sharing bank and those sorts of things. So, I try to, from an early age, practice what I preach for clients, and I think that makes me that much more effective when it comes to clients.
Yep.
Is I feel like I'm an example not only for my kids, but I'm an example for my clients. Like I live this, and I believe in it, 110%.
Yep.
And so, it's sort of everything I'm doing is this idea of, I'm aware of, myself living my legacy, and I'm doing everything I can to optimize that and make that, my best legacy.
Yep.
Which, interestingly is empowering others to live theirs, that sort of thing. And parenting is a big part. It's interesting. Not a lot of, it's hard to be a good parent. And you have, young kids yourself. It's a challenge, and you need to make that a priority. You need to stay intentional and purposeful with, what are your priorities? And so for myself, it's not everyone's priority. For me, being a good father is number one, being a good father and being a good husband. And so how, creating practices, which it's sort of like an exercise, right? And you have to create, certain practices to allow, help yourself be intentional, purposeful, present as being a parent, as being a husband.
Yeah.
And then eventually those disciplines, those exercises turn into habits. It's how you turn an awareness, right, into a habit. You have the awareness of this is what I should be doing. And then you create the exercise or the practice of it.
Yep.
And eventually it becomes your habit. You change your habits.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
Yeah. Oh, no, exactly what you're saying is, when I look at my kids every day, there are, leaders lead by example. And that's something I tell my kids every day is, hey, when you go to, he used to be in preschool. Now he does some different programs, kind of like a homeschooling program where we instituted different programs he goes to. But every day I tell both my kids, leaders lead by example. You set the example for everybody around us. And what that means is being a great listener, being disciplined, keeping your eyes on the teacher, keeping your eyes on coach. And then the other thing I try to, that I indoctrinate and tell them is, do more. Whatever they say, do it faster than anyone else and do 20% more than anyone else. And, just kind of, and because this is how I live. And so, I'm leading by that example, but also try to, instill in them, a few of those different concepts. So, thanks for sharing that, because I think it's really important. We're all out here as business owners, and, one thing business owners, we all have in common is that, it's hard to be a great business owner because it's 24 hours a day. It's hard to be a great father because you're driving that business. So, I really appreciate you sharing that. Before we can go ahead.
I think it's important also, and I try to do this with my kids. It's important for business owners, for parents, for leaders
Yeah.
to recognize, that it's sort of a constant state of imperfection and pursuit, right? No, it's important to embrace that, because the reality is, if you don't recognize that, then at some point you can think you've achieved the goal and you're done.
Yep.
What I try to impress on my kids, and it's through admitting when you're wrong, and the fact that you're always constantly improving.
Yep.
It is a pursuit. I'm very fascinated with the idea of the pursuit of happiness, or the pursuit of human fulfillment.
Right.
The word pursuit is key there. Your life is a continual pursuit of your legacy. It's never finished. And until you're dead, right? You can't contribute anymore to your own life, but even then your legacy carries on.
Yep.
But in terms of you can't be outcome sort of oriented. You've got to be process oriented.
Exactly right. There is no there and there, right? So it's just, how do you keep doing the same activities and creating better quality of life and a bigger purpose every day. So, hey,
and that's the whole point behind the legacy process. It's helping clients kind of come to terms with, sorry, but you're never done. The minute you're done, the minute you think you're done is the minute you fail.
That's right.
Bottom line.
That's right. So, I really appreciate you sharing all that. I know you have the legacy side of your business, and thanks for sharing about your family. I understand you have another side of your business that kind of feeds in. So if you could do two things for me here in the last couple of minutes here, is tell me a little about your other side of your business. And then after that, tell me who your ideal client is, because some people listen to this and say, oh, he's too big, or I'm too small, or I'm too big. I mean, just so feed in a little bit about your other side of your business, and then who are your ideal clients?
By other side, are you talking? I have a separate company called Spotlight Advisory Group, and it's related in the sense that it's all legacy. Everything I'm doing is legacy planning driven.
Yep.
But by background, I'm an artist and musician, and I spent the better part of my legal career building, a practice around legacy planning for artists and entertainers and people like that. And what I've done in the last year or two, it's been several years in the making, we really launched last year, is create a separate business around the legacy planning for artists and entertainers and people who are sort of public figures. And that's the Spotlight Group. So that's the separate arm of my business. It's very related. Everything, like I said, everything I'm doing is driven by the sort of legacy. It just seemed like a better business model to serve as sort of an outside consultant and be able to work with them on the architecture and ongoing process of their legacies.
Oh, very cool.
In terms of clients, on the Spotlight side, we designed a platform to work with everyone from working artists and to, empower them to, wake up and create art, right, for a living. And how to to me, that's success in the world of art and entertainment is, if you can wake up and make a living making art, that's living the dream, and that's what Spotlight seeks to do. So, anyone who's an artist or creative, essentially, on that side, are great clients for us. And on the law side, it's a sort of evolving thing. I mean, I think legacy planning, like many ideas, starts as sort of a first-class problem. And so clients tend to be, a little bit more affluent when they want us, start to address these issues. Mm-hmm. And so, families and business owners, I've got smaller clients, but, small is a relative kind of concept. In terms of, working with, the sort of, a blue collar family or something, I think everyone has a legacy and everyone should be legacy planning minded. How you adopt a legacy planning model in a cost efficient way for someone who has limited means is something I'm still working on. So, it tends to be, the successful professional or business owner who, of more adequate means. I don't want to put a number on it, but that works as a client.
Very cool.
Entrepreneurs, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. How can people? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and sort of small family offices, right? So the family office where there's brick and mortar family offices, and they tend to build internally, at least they should, a legacy plan, right? In terms of that process and all of that management and control and operation and things that are done internally. for that, brick and mortar family offices, it's probably, the $500 million and up family. For anyone who's got, I would argue as little as 10 million, 5 or 10 million, needs to start thinking like a family office,
right,
in terms of needing the kind of complete, very comprehensive, architecture and planning. And that's something that you can do through my form of legacy planning, where you assemble that team with outside advisors working together, right? Sort of like a virtual family office. And you have that kind of complete experience and complete plan. So that's probably, the more common client.
Oh, very cool. So where can people find out a little bit more about you, your companies, what you do, and get to know you a little better?
Sure, I have a website. It's the-Scott Law Firm, so THE-SCOTTLAWFIRM. That's my law firm, and then SpotlightAdvisoryGroup.com is for Spotlight. That's a very limited, intentionally limited website. There's not too much information on there, but there's contact info. Or you can email me direct. I'm happy to be emailed, dscott@the-scottlawfirm.com or dscott@SpotlightAdvisoryGroup.com.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate the time. Any parting words, any last things you'd like to share?
Any part of it? I just think, it's important for people to know, to not limit themselves when it comes to sort of their life goals, and to be, to sort of pursue their legacy, and to recognize that you're living it now is incredibly important. And once you sort of free yourself of some of the constraints and some of the worries, I make a big part of my life is sort of being, fearless, because, what is there to fear when you're living your purpose, right?
Right.
And you start to kind of, regress on what is there to really be afraid of? Nothing, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So, empowering people to sort of pursue their best life, part of that is encouraging them just to have the courage to do so. So I guess that would be my parting words.
No, very cool. So, exactly like you're saying. I think the big thing here is your legacy isn't just about money. Your legacy is integrating, everything you've worked hard for that's a tangible and monetary asset, but bringing it together with a purpose. So not just your assets live on, but like you said, is 50% assets are gone by the second generation and 90% by the third, is that once you have a purpose behind it, you actually create a bigger legacy. And by default, I think your assets will last longer, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations down, once you define and are driven by that purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing, right? Is the minute you stop focusing on purely transferring wealth and you start talking about purely transferring, purpose and meaning and legacy, the outcome is that you actually more successfully transfer wealth and ultimately probably end up with more money. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with money, but it's there's more to life, and that's part of legacy planning.
No, very cool, man. Well, hey, Dan, thank you for sharing all your information with us and having that purpose-driven legacy, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, bye.